Today, one of Brexit's biggest critics, the MEP Guy Verhofstadt, who is EU Parliament's chief Brexit negotiator, is meeting David Davis in Downing Street. Last week, Mr Verhofstadt said a new EU-UK relationship couldn't be achieved by putting a few extra cherries on the Brexit cake. After her Mansion House speech, he said he hoped that Theresa May have put serious proposals in the post. No doubt David Davis will be enjoying playing host. Well, let's talk now to our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, hosting him on the programme. Guy Verhofstadt wasn't impressed by the speech, but we haven't had an overwhelming amount of response generally from the European Union.
No, I mean, Guy Verhofstadt was the first out of the gate, although it seemed like a continuation of the same race. But he was, almost as soon as the words were out of Theresa May's mouth, he was being fairly dismissive about what she'd had to say about picking and choosing cherries and all of the rest of it. I doubt he's going to be much more accommodating in this meeting that's taking place as we speak now in Downing Street. But we'll be hearing from him very shortly, and we'll be hearing from David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, this afternoon, who I imagine will be doing what he does, which is to argue the lights are all going to come on soon, it will be fine in the end, don't take this negativism from Brussels too seriously.
Right, should we be surprised, though, by the response from someone like Guy Verhofstadt from the European Parliament? He's an arch-federalist and obviously is very against Brexit at any level. Is he ever going to be persuaded?
I don't think we should have been surprised by Guy Verhofstadt's response at all. I mean, you accurately described where he's coming from, and there's no reason to think he's going to move from there anytime soon. We've only just haven't truly begun the negotiations on the future relationship between Britain and the European Union, so you could argue it's not a time for cracks to appear in the wall. At the same time, well, on taking Theresa May's speech at the end of last week, look, it was received reasonably well across her party, which is something of an achievement. It was more like an equilibrium than any kind of unification, because those opposing wings are not to be united. I think at the either end of the seesaw, they were sitting reasonably still for a moment, which is about as much to a kind of triumph as Theresa May can expect at this stage of the process.
Do you agree? Are you sitting quiet for the moment to see what happens, Theresa?
Well, I think the idea of an equilibrium is quite a good approach to have on Brexit, balancing the two sides. It's not just an issue within the Conservative Party, it's something that's divided the country, and I think the Prime Minister's speech actually did a pretty good job of listening to both sides of the debate and coming up with a pragmatic set of proposals for a new relationship with Europe. And it's not surprising that a hardline federalist like Guy Verhofstadt isn't much of a fan. You know, he has a lifetime in promoting political integration of the European Union. He's not likely to be sympathetic to a country which has decided to leave that project.
Although there's been no indication from any other quarter that Theresa May has significantly moved the dial. It was in many ways a restatement of the position as it was, with more words involved and a few more illustrations, but still essentially asking for a pick and mix Brexit deal, the very deal that Brussels in all its forms is saying cannot be achieved.
Right, and as a former Northern Ireland Secretary, are you surprised that the Irish border issue is proving to be the most intractable?
It was always going to be crucially important to make sure that we found a way to get this right. I think the government's proposals in the summer set out two perfectly credible options as to how we deal with this. This doesn't have to be a big problem. We can, with common sense and goodwill on both sides, we can come up with a technology-based solution which keeps the border pretty much as open and free-flowing as it is at the moment.
Although that has been rejected by parts of the EU. Are you happy, Theresa Villiers, with the binding commitments that Theresa May has promised to European state aid and competition rules, that Britain will continue to pay into some EU funds for associate membership of some agencies, and that the legal system will remain in some way linked to the ECJ? You signed up for all of that.
I mean, I can sort of accept a deal which is broadly along those lines. It depends on the detail, and frankly, those kind of compromises do make me uncomfortable. Anything that looks as if we would be a rule taker, subject to EU rules without being able to vote on them or change them, is something that I find difficult. But it is, I think, possible to respect the result of the referendum whilst buying into certain aspects of EU rules and EU institutions. It all depends on the detail of the outcome of the negotiation.
Do you really think the Prime Minister's heart's in Brexit?
I think it is. Yes, she was very clear in Parliament yesterday. Someone asked her, is Brexit worth it? She gave a simple answer, yes.
She didn't the first time. She was asked, of course, in the press conference.
But she is determined to deliver a new partnership with Europe. I mean, I think, like me, she wants to try and deliver something with which, the majority in this country can be comfortable whether they voted leave or remain, a close relationship, but one which sees us respect the result of the referendum and take back control of our laws, our money and our borders.
Has the tone changed?
Well, it was more fulsome on Friday. There was a recognition that there will be losses, there will be hits taken, as well as the hoped for gains, that there will be some loss of access to markets as a consequence of Brexit. We hadn't heard that said in words of one syllable in quite that way before. Some would say it's just a question of common logic and political reality. And as for Theresa May, she's never going to be an ideologically committed Brexiteer like Theresa, and doesn't frankly pretend to be. She campaigned, not over enthusiastically, but campaigned to remain, and since then has avoided saying she thinks this is her ideal place to be. But she is a pragmatist. This is where we are. She's at the top of the pyramid and has to make it work if it can be made to work.
John Pienaar, thank you. Now, there